Life behind bars. That was the sentence handed down today to the Oregon woman accused of killing a Maryland mother for her unborn child. Korena Roberts pleaded guilty to killing Heather Snively last year and cutting the baby from her stomach.
The placenta thing.
But do you know?
But it was already bleeding when it was getting.
But that placenta.
That's what I said that.
I know, but the placenta.
Yeah.
Carries parental DNA. Okay.
Okay.
That DNA that's in that placenta, they can get DNA from the parents of that placenta, and it shows exactly who the parents are.
She picked it up and she smashed it over my head, and that's when I held up my hand. I said, I don't know why you're doing this. I love you. And she said, if you love me, you'll let me do this. And then she stuck it into my neck.
It's hard to imagine the pain of desperately longing for a child, but not being able to get pregnant until it is something a woman experiences themselves. But few people are so desperate for a baby that they would ever even consider going to such drastic and horrific lengths as the 3 women in this video did. The following stories tell the tale of 3 incredibly shocking stories of babies being cut from the womb of their own mother. Stay tuned.
Held without bail under suicide watch at the Washington County Jail, 27-year-old Korena Roberts makes her first court appearance. Investigators say she murdered 21-year-old Heather Snively, who was 8 months pregnant, and sliced open her womb to steal the baby. Heather's mom says her daughter met Korena Roberts on the website Craigslist, and that Heather thought she was going to Roberts' home to exchange baby clothes.
This is a truly disturbing case of a twisted, evil woman who was willing to do whatever it took to keep her live-in boyfriend from leaving her, even if it meant taking the life of someone else in the process. The victim in this case is a young woman named Heather Snively. It was the spring of 2009, and Heather and her fiancé, Chris Popp, had just recently moved to Beaverton, Oregon, in hopes of it being a safe place for them to start their family. Heather was expecting their first child, a little boy, in just a very short period of time. They were extremely excited to meet their son and had already chosen his name, John Stephen. As a very young couple, and this being their first child, Heather and her fiancé were pretty much starting fresh when it came to gathering baby supplies. They needed to try to save as much money as they could to use towards their future, so Heather had challenged to find what she could get for a good price and buy secondhand if possible. Heather would often check online to see if anyone was selling baby clothes they no longer needed. One of the sites that she frequented was Craigslist. Through that website, she met a lot of other soon-to-be moms and other moms who were done having children and had clothing and other supplies to sell or give away. While most of these women were truly kind and giving people, one of the mothers that Heather met and ended up connecting with was not. This woman was named Korena Roberts. Korena was 27 years old and already had 2 young children of her own. Korena had been seeing someone new, and they had been together for 5 years. Throughout that time, Korena had been pregnant once but ended up miscarrying, and since then, she had not been able to get pregnant again. Korena knew that this current partner of hers wanted children of his own, and she was afraid that if she couldn't give that to him, then he may leave her. This made her incredibly desperate to come up with a child to give him no matter what it took. So Korena came up with an insanely evil and disturbing plan. To any normal person, it would sound absolutely unhinged, and yet Korena truly thought she could pull it off. The plan started with Korena going out of her way to become good friends with Heather. After all, this was Heather's first time being pregnant, and she had already been through it twice before. The two started talking online and over the phone. Then one day, Korena went to her boyfriend and told him that she had some very exciting news. She was pregnant again, but there was one major problem. Korena wasn't actually pregnant. It was a lie, and part of her grand scheme to keep her boyfriend around. Korena didn't just tell her boyfriend that she was pregnant, but she told everyone around. She wanted everyone to know. As time went on, Korena started displaying some signs of a typical pregnant mother, so much so that people didn't suspect that anything was off. She was gaining weight, taking prenatal vitamins, and watching a lot of videos to prepare for her birth. She even started making some of her own baby clothes by hand. Meanwhile, she and Heather continued to talk and even met a couple of times in person. Some of Korena's neighbors would see her and Heather taking walks around the property as Heather grew closer to her due date. Then came the tragic day of June 5th, 2009. It started out like any other. Heather told Chris that she was meeting up with Korena to exchange some baby clothes. She was very happy, her due date was approaching quickly, and she gathered up much of her supplies. She kissed her fiancé goodbye and headed off. Tragically, that would be the last time he would ever see Heather alive again. On that particular day, Heather and Korena had gone out shopping together. When they were done, they headed back to Korena to sort through the different baby things that they had gotten. Not long after they arrived at the home, Heather went to use Korena's restroom real quick. This was the moment that Korena decided it was time to follow through with her evil plan. After all, little John Steven was expected any time now, and this might be her last chance. So while Heather was still in the bathroom, Korena hurried to grab her weapon of choice, an extendable metal baton. Korena then burst into the bathroom and ambushed Heather, striking her over and over again with the baton. She hit her as hard as she could in the head, 15 times. But Heather was determined not to go down without a fight. She was going to do her best and defend herself and her baby. So she and Korena began to struggle until eventually Korena was able to overtake her and knock her unconscious. Once Heather was out cold, Korena moved on to the next step of her plan, which was to steal Heather's baby right out of her womb. She used a razor blade to cut open Heather's stomach and pull the baby out. But much to her disappointment, little John Steven was stillborn. Meanwhile, Heather had suffered an extreme amount of blood loss and ended up passing away. As fast as she could, she wrapped up Heather's body in a rug and hid it in a crawl space where she hoped her boyfriend would not find it. Then she took the baby in her arms and called her boyfriend to tell him that she had just given birth.
Neighbor Terry King says Roberts had been telling everyone she was pregnant, even her live-in boyfriend.
And his wife had apparently called his work and told him, or had a message relayed to him that she had just delivered a baby at home. And so then he rushed home from work.
When Korena's boyfriend got home, he found her sitting inside the bathtub with water running. He immediately called 911 to get the baby some help, but the baby had already passed away. It wasn't until paramedics arrived and the baby was taken to the hospital to be examined that doctors realized that she was lying. This was not Korena's baby. This baby belonged to someone else. How did they know this? Well, they insisted on examining Korena because she had told them that she had just given birth. Even though she had been hesitant at first, she eventually agreed. As soon as the doctors examined her, they realized that her tubes were tied. This meant that it wasn't even possible for her to have given birth. Yet here she was, trying to pass off this baby as her own. So detectives went out to Korena's home, and sure enough, they discovered Heather's body. It was clear that her stomach had been cut open and her baby stolen. Soon after, Korena was arrested and charged with Heather's murder. But to everyone's shock, it was determined that she was probably not going to be charged for the death of John Steven.
Friday, investigators say Roberts and her boyfriend called 911 saying she'd just given birth and the baby wasn't breathing. The baby died, and at the hospital, doctors determined Roberts was lying. Sheriff's deputies searched her home and found Heather Snively's body stuffed in a crawl space, her 8-month-old fetus missing from her body. And the district attorney now says Roberts may not be charged with the baby's murder.
Even though Heather was far along with her pregnancy and would have likely given birth to a healthy baby boy if not for what Korena did, it was not expected that the court would recognize that John Steven was a person.
Oregon, in order to have a homicide, it has to be a living human being, so that is a central issue to what charges, if any, can be levied for the child.
So if the baby never took a breath outside the womb, it's not considered a living being?
Most likely that would be the case, yes.
Obviously, this ended up stirring up quite a bit of controversy.
Case is certainly renewing the debate over how our state handles pregnancy-related violent crimes and how they're prosecuted. Anti-abortion groups have focused on personhood amendments in the past, which would have defined a fetus in the womb as a person. All attempts have failed, though, including the most recent in 2014, with more than 60% voting it down.
It was ultimately going to come down to a judge's decision as far as whether or not Korena could actually be charged charged with John Stevens' murder, or if she could at least be charged with kidnapping for taking the child out of its mother's womb.
If prosecutors in this case were able to use a kidnapping theory to secure charges for 4 counts of aggravated murder. The defense had argued that wasn't applicable because the infant was unborn, but still a judge ended up upholding those charges in addition to 2 counts of first-degree robbery.
So ultimately, the judge ended up ruling against the defense and in favor of the prosecution, which was bad news for Korena. This meant that her situation was going to be even more dire, and now there was a good chance that she could face the ultimate sentence of death for her disgusting crime. But if she ended up being offered a plea deal, if she decided to take it, prosecutors would take death off the table. She ended up deciding to take it.
Life behind bars. That was the sentence handed down today to the Oregon woman accused of killing a Maryland mother for her unborn child. Korena Roberts pleaded guilty to killing Heather Snively last year and cutting the baby from her stomach.
While in court, Korena kept her replies to the judge very brief and cried almost the entire time. She told the judge that she wanted to take responsibility for what she had done.
I'm taking responsibility because I am guilty.
Korena Roberts cried and visibly trembled as she pled guilty to aggravated murder. It means she'll go to prison for the rest of her life.
Heather's family would have liked to have seen Korena receive death for what she did, but they believe that life without parole is the next best thing because it will mean that she will never be free again and she won't be able to hurt anyone else.
10-year-old Roberts will have no possibility of parole and cannot appeal her conviction.
I felt this was the best punishment for her for this situation, because she won't ever get out.
Heather's fiance, Chris, lost the love of his life and his son all at the same time because of Korena's heartless actions.
You come out to a place for a fresh beginning, and to have something so tragic happen with such good intentions.
In court, Chris took his time to make a victim impact statement about how Korena had destroyed his life and taken away everything that meant the most to him.
During the hearing, Chris directed his comments at Robert, saying, "I hope you remember what you did for the rest of your life." Snively's father, Kevin, said the entire family is deeply affected by the loss of his daughter and his unborn grandson.
I don't think there's a father in this world that can understand this, except for a father that's lost a daughter and a grandson.
Do you think that life without parole is a fair sentence in this case, or should Korena have had to pay for her life for taking Heather's? Let us know what you think. In March of 2015, 26-year-old Michelle Wilkins of Boulder, Colorado was on cloud 9. She was 7 months pregnant with a baby girl whom she had already named Aurora. Michelle could hardly wait to meet her firstborn. Her and her partner had moved to the Boulder area to be closer to family as they prepared to welcome their firstborn. Their loved ones had showered them in gifts to help them get ready. Michelle was making sure that they would have all the baby supplies that they would need. As her due date grew closer, Michelle was looking for a few last-minute items and came across an advertisement on Craigslist posted by a woman who was giving away some maternity clothes and baby girl items. The listing was posted by a former nurse's aide named Dynell Lane. Dynell had been telling everyone, including her partner, that she was pregnant, but it was all an elaborate lie and part of a sick, twisted plan. Dynell gained Michelle's trust and befriended and then lured her to her home by promising her some items that she could use for her little girl. Michelle came to Dynell's house and walked with her down to the basement where the baby stuff supposedly was. But in an act of cruel betrayal, Dynell ended up attacking her using a glass bottle.
Picked her up and she smashed it over my head, and that's when I held up my hand. I said, "I don't know why you're doing this. I love you." And she said, "If you love me, you'll let me do this." And then she stabbed it into my neck.
This was someone that Michelle trusted, and now she was trying to kill her. She barely had any time to process what was going on.
Okay. And did you feel pain?
I did, but there was so much adrenaline also, I think.
Okay. And when she hit you over the head with a bottle, did you feel pain?
Yes.
Okay.
Despite the already extensive wounds she sustained, the only thing that Michelle could focus on was her baby. She knew that she had to keep fighting so that she could save herself and baby Aurora.
I just thought of her and I felt like I wanted to survive also for her. And so I fought back harder, and I remember she got up. She was straddling me before, and she went further up and actually pinned down my arms with her knees.
But Dynell continued to beat her until Michelle eventually fell unconscious. Michelle eventually woke up, confused and in excruciating pain. She was covered in blood and having a hard time remembering the details of what happened.
And I tried to move, and I just felt this really intense pain in my stomach. And I looked down and, I just saw this really big cut across my stomach, and I pulled my pants for high-waisted pregnancy pants, so I pulled them up, and I started looking around the room. Things started coming back about, how she had attacked me, so, I kind of started thinking maybe she's still in the house.
Even though she was in so much pain that she was barely able to stay conscious, she mustered the strength to grab a phone and call 911.
Come on, tell me what happened.
She cut me.
Who cut you?
I don't know.
What is the suspect's name?
I don't remember.
The problem was that Michelle wasn't exactly sure where she was, and this made it hard to give the dispatcher an address to send the paramedics and law enforcement to.
She cut you with?
I'm pregnant. It's in my stomach. I'm afraid.
She cut you in your stomach?
I'm pregnant.
But Michelle stayed awake and stayed on the phone with the 911 dispatcher until eventually she heard the sound of help finally arriving.
Stay on the phone with me, okay? Don't go to sleep. We got everybody in the way. They're trying to find you now.
I heard the doorbell ring. Is that them? Help.
Meanwhile, Dynell had already arrived at the hospital after being taken there by her partner. Her partner had gotten home and found her covered in blood and holding a baby that was not breathing. But it didn't take long for the doctors to put two and two together and realize that Dynell had not given birth and baby Aurora was not hers. Doctors were able to save Michelle's life, but tragically, little Aurora did not survive.
When did you first realize that you were no longer pregnant with Aurora?
It was not until the next day in the hospital when I woke up.
And someone told you what had happened to Aurora? Do you remember?
I think I realized. But I still asked Dan when we were in the hospital, when they pulled all the tubes out.
She tearfully recalled the moment that her partner confirmed the truth that she already knew deep down in her heart.
He said that she didn't make it.
The nurses brought Michelle's baby Aurora so that she could hold her and have a chance to say goodbye. It was the moment Michelle had been dreaming of when she would finally get to hold her daughter for the first time. But it was nothing at all like she had imagined, because she knew this would be both the first and last time she would get to do this.
I sang to her, I read to her, and it was really bittersweet.
Dynell was arrested and hit with a slew of charges, including first-degree murder, assault, and unlawful termination of a pregnancy.
Everything that happened on March 18th was an intentional, purposeful act on the part of the defendant to get a baby.
As detectives looked further into the case, they discovered the great lengths that Dynell had gone to in order to try to convince everyone she was pregnant and pull off this elaborate lie.
She had apparently putting on weight to look pregnant. There had been a baby shower for her held by some of her friends and family. It was clearly an obsession for her.
After a dramatic trial, the jury eventually came to a decision for the verdict in this case. It was the news that everyone had been waiting for.
The jury find the defendant guilty.
Earlier this week, Dynell Lane was found guilty of all charges.
While in court hearing her sentencing, Dynell wept openly. This was a drastic difference from how she appeared throughout the trial, which was, for the most part, cold and unemotional. This was something that Michelle would later call her out for, saying that her tears were only tears of self-pity and not of remorse for what she had done. While giving her victim impact statement, Michelle put up an enlarged photo of Aurora that was taken during the very short amount of time that she got to spend with her.
I did not learn until the trial just how many opportunities you had to do the right thing and then chose not to. You embraced your narcissistic fantasy to fulfill the lie you created, and it was more important than my right to live and Aurora's right to live. This is a picture of her.
She addressed her child's killer directly, saying that she believed that she no longer deserved the right to live among society and hoped she would get the maximum sentence possible.
But I fervently hope that you use the rest of your time on this earth with meditation and prayer to help you come to terms with what you have done. It is your only chance for healing the hurt that you have caused.
Michelle got the justice she was hoping for when Dynell was ultimately sentenced to 100 years behind bars. But she says it will take time and a lot of healing before she can fully process this heartbreaking and shocking loss that she has experienced.
The thing that I've really felt consistently in the wake of all of this is just complete disbelief and complete shock that someone could do that and that I would be the victim of that.
Stun gun, a drywall knife, and zip ties. That's what police say a Kentucky woman used to murder a pregnant woman and kidnap her unborn baby.
And those were just a few of the new details that emerged from the suspect's first court appearance.
This is the heartbreaking case of 21-year-old Jamie Stice, who was robbed of both her life and the chance to ever experience the joy of becoming a mom, something she dreamed of. This was taken from her by a truly sadistic woman named Kathy Coy.
33-year-old Kathy Coy is accused of murdering 21-year-old Jamie Stice and cutting Stice's unborn child out of her womb. At a probable cause hearing in Warren County earlier today, a detective described exactly what he says Coy did before, during, and after that murder.
Kathy met Jamie through Facebook and pretended to be her friend, all while planning to kill her and steal her unborn child. Kathy lied and told Jamie, and even her own family, that she was pregnant. She then lured Jamie out to her house by telling her that they could go baby supplies shopping together. That's when she ambushed and killed the young mom-to-be. The gory details of what happened were discussed in court for all to hear.
In front of a packed courtroom, Kathy Coy came before a judge for the first time. She's charged with murdering Jamie Stice and kidnapping the pregnant 21-year-old's unborn child. Coy was in tears even before a detective began to outline the case against her.
It didn't take Detective Chad Wynn long to determine that something was very off about Kathy Coy. She had a hard time keeping her story straight and from the beginning was very defensive, angry, and suspicious looking.
She had a miscarriage and then she pretended she was pregnant and led her whole family to believe she was pregnant.
Detective Chad Wynn says while Coy pretended to be pregnant, she befriended Stice. Then, last Wednesday, he says Coy showed up at a friend's house claiming she had just given birth.
When Jamie came over to Kathy's house, Kathy used a stun on her to overtake her. She completely brutalized Jamie's body in the process of stealing her baby from her womb.
Police say Coy used a stun gun on Stice and also bound her arms with zip ties. While Wynn described the scene to a judge, the victim's family members were overcome with emotion.
A friend of Kathy's had called 911 when she showed up carrying a newborn baby that she claimed she had just given birth to. But it was immediately clear that something was very wrong. Kathy had not just taken the victim's baby, but she had removed her uterus and some of the organs as well in the process.
But do you know?
But it was already bleeding when it was getting.
But that placenta.
That's what I said that.
I know, but the placenta.
Yeah.
Carries parental DNA. Okay.
Okay.
That DNA that's in that placenta. They can get DNA from the parents of that DNA, that placenta, and it shows exactly who the parents are.
It didn't take long after Kathy got to the hospital and was examined that doctors realized she had not given birth, and this was not her baby.
She advised that Miss Coy had no pants on, and she was sitting on the placenta and the female organs and holding the baby in her hands.
Police say Coy and the baby boy were taken to the hospital, but the doctors called police to report the birth as suspicious.
All of her female organs were still in her, so therefore there's no way that this could be her baby.
So whose baby was it? That was what Detective Wynn had to find out. It only took him a quick Facebook search to find what he had been looking for.
Police then accessed Coy's Facebook account and discovered two of her friends were pregnant. One of them was Stice.
When Kathy realized that nobody was going to buy her lie about giving birth to a baby herself, she changed up her story and said that she bought the newborn for $550.
I then asked Miss Coy if that baby was Jamie Stice's. I asked her directly.
What was her response?
She says, I don't know. At that time, I was very alarmed by this.
Wynn says Coy angrily denied any wrongdoing, but eventually led police to Stice's body, which was found in a wooded area.
Kathy was arrested and charged with Jamie's murder. It was later revealed that she actually tried to get her own child to help her commit this unthinkable crime.
It's just heartbreaking to all of us. And what she done to her was sick, and she was robbed of being a mom.
That state police detective also testified that before the murder, Coy told her daughter that she was going to kidnap a child and also asked her teenage son to help her commit a murder.
Her son advised that she asked him, "Would you help me commit a crime?" And he said, "What kind of crime?" And she first said theft. He said, "No, but I wouldn't tell her." She then asked him if he would help her commit murder.
It wasn't until Kathy's teenage son refused to help her commit the murder that she laughed it off and said she had only been joking. Kathy had 2 healthy children of her own from previous relationships, but seemed obsessed with the idea of convincing everyone that she was pregnant again. She even used a fake sonogram picture to further convince people close to her lies, and kept this whole plan going for months before the murder. Mental illness was the best excuse that Kathy's defense team could come up with. She ended up taking a plea deal, which would keep her from being sentenced to death. She did, however, get sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. The victims' loved ones were actually pleased with this sentence because they felt that the death penalty would be too merciful, considering what Kathy did to Jamie. Now, because of the sentence that she received, she will have the whole rest of her life behind bars to think about what she did. Probably the biggest shock out of this entire case is that the baby Kathy stole ended up surviving against all odds. His name is Isaiah. He is healthy and will be raised by his father and other extended family members. They are determined to give this little boy the life he deserves and the life that his mother would have wanted him to have. Which one of these cases do you find the most shocking? Do you think these killers got what they deserved? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.